morning. To start my morning today, I have my sun lamp right here. Now it's starting to get into wintertime. I start to fall into a lower phase of emotions. A little more reserved, more tired. I think this has to do with the sunlight, so I got a sun lamp for Christmas, and hopefully that'll make a difference. Today I have some positive affirmations. These are nighttime themed, but they say you can also use them for the morning. So I'm going to use those, the sun lamp and the journal, to start my day off on a good note. I want to start the day with some appreciation because I think that's really often overlooked. Oh. I appreciate I was able to laugh at that moment. All right. So I have my notebook. I have my sweet dreams. I want to shuffle these cards in here. Each card has their own affirmation on it. And I'm going to shuffle them, and the first three that come up, I'm going to write down. Shoot. Alright, so I have these affirmations here. I'm going to shuffle them up, and I'm going to use the first three that come up. I'm going to write them down into my journal, just to try to internalize some of the messages that they have, so I can start the day on a good note. So I've been shuffling this a little bit, and let's see the first card. The first card is connects. I create strong emotional connections with the important people in my life. Connects. Next one is experience. My dreams take me to wonderful places that are filled with wonder, delight, and joy. Experience. I guess so. Attraction. I attract a loving, happy, fulfilling relationship into my life. Attraction. Alright, I'm going to write these down and see if they have any positive effects. For a lot of my life, I felt like emotions have taken control over me. And in a lot of ways, emotions have had a sort of straitjacket effect on me, where they lead me and cause me to do things that maybe I don't necessarily feel like I have control over. But as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that emotions are a powerful tool. Shutting them out doesn't necessarily help, because then your emotions become something that you're fighting against, that you're actively repressing, or that you're not actively expressing. And therefore there's a sense of disconnection there. So my goal now is, how can you use emotions to express accurately what's going on in your internal world in order to create a stronger sense of self, and how I imagine it to reach your full potential. So how I imagine emotions, I imagine there's two sort of sides. There's the logical side and there's the emotional side. And each side has their own purpose. Logically, we can connect one thing to the other, see how things mix, find patterns in certain circumstances. And with emotions, we can start to figure out how we feel as individuals about certain things. And we can start to feel what resonates with us, and maybe what doesn't feel so good and maybe we want to stay away from. And so these can give us indicators of how we want to live our lives, what's fulfilling to us as individuals, and how we can live in congruence with our mind and our body. So I was looking at an article by Spark Emotions. It's a company that uses emotions in order to figure out marketing for different businesses, and how emotions play in these marketing advertisements, and how these advertisements affect their customers. So for example, they had three different measures. One was for pleasure, one was for the level of arousal, and one was for control. So what does that mean? So for pleasure, it means joy. Does it bring the consumer a sense of joy when they see this advertisement, or a sense of ease, happiness, those sorts of positive emotions that we typically feel towards ads that are trying to entice us, make us feel a certain way, make us feel a positive emotion. We also have arousal, so you have high levels of arousal or low level of arousal. The difference being that high level is like surprise, and low level is like quiet and reserved. You also have senses of control. So if you want your consumer to feel like they have a sense of control, perhaps over a situation, circumstance, maybe a problem that's going on in their lives. For example, if you see those commercials where they have like a cup and full of water, and they're like, "Oh, you don't want to pour a cup of water like this," and then they spill it everywhere, and that would try to symbolize a sense of a lack of control that customer may have. And so, to counteract this, a marketer may use pleasure or satisfaction, as mentioned before, to try to counteract the sense of a lack of control. So you have fear and control. Control mitigates fear. It's kind of like a scale that you have. You have fear on one end and control on the other. And you have control on one end and pleasure on the other. So you can kind of mix these different emotions around. I'm going to post a picture right here of the emotional wheel that they use. But that's one way in which you can measure emotions. Another one by livescience.com, they measured the EEG, or the brain activity. It's called the intracranial electroencephalogram. I don't even know how to pronounce it. It's a big science word. But basically, they put nodes on the inside of epileptic patients' skull in order to figure out their electrical brain patterns that was going on in their brain when they were feeling certain things. So, for example, this study was able to find that when patients were experiencing sadness, 13 out of 21, or a little over half of these patients, experienced sadness in activated areas of the memory and in activated areas of emotion. So you can start to see with that emotion is closely correlated to the memories that maybe we are reaching towards. So that's why sometimes people who dwell on the past, or if you're like me sometimes and you ruminate, especially during COVID when you didn't really have much else to do and you kind of just stuck inside, not much to do, you can see the memory being activated a lot and connected to the emotion, which then sometimes leads to sadness in over 50% of patients. Now, granted, this is towards epileptic patients, so not necessarily someone with a normal brain that we may consider, but this is a circumstance where they're able to capture EEG rather than an fMRI, for example. fMRI would measure blood pressure, which doesn't give you as instantaneous of a reading because it measures where the blood pressure is going rather than where the electrical signals are in the brain. You also have another measure of emotion by Iris B. Moss and Michael D. Robinson. They did a review on emotion that said emotion is a consensual. Emotion is an experiential. Emotion is experiential, physiological, and behavior response to personally meaningful stimuli. So emotions conceptualizes them as Emotions are experiential, physiological, and behavior responses to personally meaningful stimuli. So what does this mean? So personally meaningful stimuli, that's going back to the sorts of memories, the experiences that we had, that gives us a context for our lives. So a lot of the experiences that we have in our lives shape the sort of experiences or the way that we're going to interpret future experiences. It's sort of like building a house. The sort of information that we get growing up, it creates a foundation for us, and then as we go on with the rest of our lives, we're building our house on top of this foundation. Now, if you take a look at our foundation, you take a look at our childhood, you see this as a common theme throughout a lot of humans. It's trying to figure out where they've come from, where you've come from, to try to understand who you are and where you want to go moving forward. So that's sort of the personal meaningful stimuli and what that means. But in terms of experiential, like emotions, they happen out of experience. They happen physiologically, so we feel our emotions in our body physically. Now, there is some sort of debate of whether you feel the emotion in your body first before you feel it in your brain, or vice versa, and whether you feel the tightness. For example, if you're feeling anxious, you'll feel a tightness in your chest, or if you're feeling calm, you feel a sense of warmth in your body. Does the warmth happen first when you're feeling the emotion, or does the feeling emotion happen first and then you feel it in your body? And so there's a certain sense of disconnect, but there is a sort of consensus that they are connected in some way. And actually, it's said that by smiling for 10, 15, 30 seconds can actually trick your brain into thinking that you're happy. So there are certain physical elements that you can do to change your emotional state, and there's sort of emotional states that can also affect the physical state as well. So this is a little bit of look at emotions. Now, this is all fine and good. I mean, this is all scientific, but what about in terms of practical use of emotions? How can emotions be used for helpful applications in our lives? So, this is interesting because there are a lot of emotions that people deem as negative. So, for example, with me, I suffer from anxiety and depression, and ways that I cope with this. I like to keep my mind busy. I'm what you would call a very high functioning, a very high functioning anxious person, depressed person. I'm very high functioning. That's the way I cope. I cope by keeping busy, by doing things. So I do yoga. I do a lot of creative stuff like painting, journaling, positive affirmations, yoga, a lot of exercise, eating. I love to eat, which may or may not be a good thing, but for me, it's fine. So there's a lot of different emotions that we have. They can affect our habits, our moods, and our habits can also affect our emotional states as well. Now, how can we use emotions to our advantage? Well, by recognizing them and processing them in a healthy way, I believe that that's how we can unlock the power that they have. And by repressing emotions, I believe that that is how we get in our own way, in a sense. When people, for example, this sort of toxic positivity that's going around sometimes, and it says, like, oh, just look on the bright side, or just be positive. And sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes we have legitimate reasons why we're sad, and legitimate reasons why we're experiencing a certain emotion. And by trying to hide this fact, by trying to hide some of the emotions that we are feeling, we then, on a certain level, are self-sabotaging ourselves because we're expending energy holding back emotions, and it can actually be sensed as a sort of tightness in the chest, tightness in the stomach when we're repressing these emotions. And this is a waste of energy at the end of the day, right? I mean, if you're spending all this energy trying to hold back emotions that you're feeling, then they're going to stay with you. They're going to stay with you as that tightness, and rather than letting them go and accepting a sense of calm. Now, that is something I'm still working on too, and something I don't have totally figured out. But what I do know is that it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. And there are ways in which you can express this in a healthy way in which you're not carrying it all on yourself. Because I know as someone is like a people pleaser like me, I know that I've experienced a lot of pain in my life. I know pain is a universal experience of the human experience, and that's holding on to that isn't going to help you. And voicing those feelings are the first step to letting them go, I think. And that's the hardest thing, because it takes bravery, it takes courage to voice what you're feeling. But I believe that every step that we take to expressing that what we're feeling is a step towards the right direction of honoring yourself, respecting yourself, building self-esteem. And when you have self-esteem, you can better be there for the people that matter in your lives. So take that with you today. Take that with you, that no emotion is invalid. There's nothing wrong with you. You are wonderful just as you are. And a practice that I like to take with me is every day, I like to look in the mirror, I look myself in the eyes, and I say, Abram, or whatever your name is, I love you, I forgive you, and I accept you just as you are. Now, before we go today, I want to give you this affirmation that I've randomly shuffled. Inner child. I reconnect with my inner child through fun and play. And remember, life isn't that serious. I mean, we're only going to be here for so long, and every day is a gift, and no day is guaranteed. So take that with you. Have some fun. What do you like to do for fun? I'll see you next time.